First they raised the retirement age, and then they froze our tax thresholds. Now they're questioning whether the triple lock is fair and if it's sustainable. Then they float the idea of means testing either the state pension or the triple lock just to start the conversation. But just take a step back and ask yourself a simple question. Is this all by design? Does this sound like economic policy, or maybe this is just some sort of a playbook and we're all being softened up for future pension cuts by the dismantling of our pension promises? Now the question is, are we all being prepared for change, or are we just simply being played? In this week's video, I'm going to build on last week's video and take a wider look at the future for our pension cuts. We're going to be looking at the triple lock debate, frozen tax thresholds, the future of means testing, and how the media frame the older generation as some sort of a financial burden. Welcome everyone to the Great Retirement Betrayal. Hi, my name is Simon, and I'm a chartered financial planner with decades of experience helping clients and their families prepare ahead with confidence by keeping more of what they've earned. Now, I'm an insider, so if you're serious about building wealth for your retirement and you don't trust any government to help you get there, then you are in the right place. So as the UK grapples with a soaring public debt, an ageing population and a growing sense of intergenerational friction, the question needs to be asked, are we all being groomed for yet more pension cuts? Well, there's no official policy that's going to dare to admit it, but there's an unsettling alignment of changes from the frozen tax thresholds to debates over means testing and shifts in the tone of the media that suggest that we're all edging towards a dismantling of long-standing retirement promises. Now, after public outrage of the state pension increases of just 75 pence a week back in 2000, there needed to be a mechanism to ensure that the state pension held its value against inflation in the future so that pensioners were treated fairly and, of course, with dignity. What that meant was the triple lock was then introduced in 2010, and it was a political promise to protect pensioners. Now, all this meant that state pensions were going to rise annually by whichever is the highest of inflation, average earnings, or 2.5%. Now, on paper, that is bulletproof, but in practice, it's a fiscal time bomb. Now, in 2024, pensioners saw an inflation-busting 8.5% hike due to wage growth, with another 4.1% increase this tax year in 2025, taking the maximum state pension to £11,973 a year. And whilst that seems fantastic in principle, the cracks are already starting to show. Now, in the Isle of Man, they've already ditched their own triple lock, and they're citing insolvency risk in an article in the Times saying that the pension guarantee in the Isle of Man should be the higher of inflation, or 2%. In fact, this has already happened in the UK in 2022, and the triple lock became a double lock, and some argue that in the UK, we're not going to be that far behind the Isle of Man. Now, one of the sneakier shifts has been the government's decision to freeze the income tax thresholds and the personal allowances until April 2028, but that may be extended even further to the end of this government term. Now, the result of all this is something called a fiscal drag, and that means wages and pensions rise, more people are going to get nudged into the higher tax brackets, meaning they're going to be paying more tax without feeling any richer, and pensioners are going to be hit especially hard. Now, in 2021, there were 6.5 million people over the age of 65 that were paying income tax, but by 2024, just 3 years later, the pensioners who were paying income tax had ballooned to an almighty 8.5 million people. In fact, Age UK has projected that by 2029, more than half, that's 50% of new state pensioners, are going to be paying income tax on their state pension, and that's up from just 1% a few years ago. Just let that sink in for a minute. Now, right now, the state pension is universal, and that means that everyone who qualifies for it via their national insurance record is going to get it. Now, a gentle reminder is that the state pension is a legally defined benefit. It's not a right or an entitlement, so the eligibility criteria or the payment format can be changed simply by government changing the relevant legislation. But there is an idea that means testing the state pension is actually gaining traction among policymakers and pundits alike. Now, of course, the government officially denies any plans to means test the state pension, but the drumbeat is getting louder and louder in the media, and especially some think tank circles who are obviously advising the government. So supporters of means testing is going to argue that it's going to offer more targeted support to the most vulnerable in society, whereas critics are going to say that this is the thin edge of the wedge, and once you start means testing benefits, others are going to soon follow like dominoes in sequence. Now, if any government did decide to go down the means testing route, that would mark a decisive break with the concept of retirement as a universally supported phase of life. Now, if you're finding value in this video about how we could all be being groomed for future pension cuts, then please hit the like and subscribe to the channel, as we're working very, very hard to create and build a community of 20,000 people strong. Now, another massive shift that's quietly redefining our retirement plan, and that is a rising state pension age. Now, we all know that it's currently set at age 66, and that's due to rise to age 67, and that's going to be phased in between 2026 and 2028. But there's going to be a further rise to age 68, and that could be brought forward to as early as 2037, although there's talk of bringing that in a lot sooner than planned. Now, the justification for that is being framed as we're all enjoying a longer life expectancy, but the truth is closer to the fact that the state pension currently costs about £125 billion a year, and that's rising every year, and that's causing huge strain on the UK finances. Now, here's the catch that the media won't always explain and they won't always tell us about, and that is that life expectancy gains have actually recently stalled in the UK. Now, the ONS has reported declines in life expectancy growth, especially in deprived areas, and that's been highlighted by this article from AJ Bell. So what that means is, while pension ages rise, the years that people can actually enjoy their retirement without having to work is actually going to be falling. Now, this shift is hugely important, as it means millions of people could work for less reward, and those in manual or even lower paid jobs are going to be disproportionately affected. Now, to me, this looks like it's a cost-cutting move that's been disguised to look like it's being done because the population's fitter, healthier, and generally living longer. So if you scan the legacy media headlines, you're going to spot something that's very harmful, and it's a narrative that started to form and to take root. And that is that pensioners are lucky, they're housing and asset rich, but they're income tax paying light, and that is costing the country billions. But these very broad brushstrokes ignore the reality that for millions of pensioners who may have property wealth, but they're going to be relying solely on a very, very modest income to survive on. In fact, Interactive Investor says that 28% of over 55-year-olds are going to be completely retired on the state pension income. And The Guardian states that a third of pensioners will only have the state pension to fall back on in their retirement. Now, the media framing often pits younger and older generations against each other, and this is a very convenient distraction to take away from successive government failures. Now, this low-resolution type of thinking can distort the public debate, and that can be then weaponized to justify these future policy changes. Now, the concept of intergenerational fairness is also worth considering, but it's increasingly being used as a cover for decisions that are going to disproportionately affect older people. Now, that tension, whether real or manufactured, is being exploited to move that political window on what changes and what policies are likely to be tolerated for the future. Now, there are going to be risks in overplaying these divisions, as it risks both social cohesion as well as undermining trust in the welfare system. In short, pension cuts aren't just economic, they're going to be ideological. So are we all being groomed for pension cuts? Well, there's no one saying it out loud, but the signs are most definitely there. There are changes to the state pension age, there's frozen tax thresholds, there's growing tax burdens, and there are shifting narratives all pointing in one direction. And that's going to be the slow erosion of the post-war promise that a life of work should be rewarded with a secure and a supported retirement. Now, they may not be using the sledgehammer approach to break all the runes. It's more like the drip, drip, drip of water torture. Now, if you want to understand more about the potential changes, I've linked a further 2 videos in this series about why falling birth rates may mean we get to retire at age 71. And when it comes to taking your tax-free cash, she should just take it or leave it. Thank you so much for watching to the very, very end, and for your time, for your patience. As always, I'm going to see you all again next week.